Tras un periodo de inestabilidad en el Sacro Imperio romano-germánico, una familia originaria de un cantón suizo llegó al poder en el año 1273 y llegó al poder en nombre de un príncipe llamado Rodolfo. Este aristócrata representó a los Habsburgo durante casi 20 años en el trono. Sin embargo, sus influencias en los reinos alemanes no fueron suficientes para garantizar la sucesión en sus hijos. Durante el siglo siguiente, sus descendientes lucharon a través de la guerra y de astutos matrimonios contra otras dinastías germánicas, como los Luxemburgo o los Wittelsbach. Recién a mediados del siglo XV volvieron a coronar a un emperador de su familia, que fue Federico III, pero esta vez ya nunca más soltarían el trono. El hijo de Federico, Maximiliano I, y su nieto, Carlos I, constituyeron el imperio más grande de toda la cristiandad. Durante los siglos XVI y XVII, los Habsburgo estaban dominando casi todo el mundo conocido. Pero ya durante el siglo XVIII su poder comenzó a atenuarse en tiempos de efervescencia ilustrada, y aunque algunos emperadores siguieron destacándose, como María Teresa o José I, los tiempos modernos terminaron de desprestigiar al imperio, hasta su disolución a manos de Napoleón Bonaparte en 1806. Sin embargo, la familia siguió reinando en Austria, primero bajo el imperio austríaco y luego bajo el imperio austrohúngaro. Ya el último rey en gobernar lo que era el antiguo Sacro Imperio, o por lo menos su capital, fue Carlos I, Carlos el Beato. Hoy en Historiopolis conocemos a los emperadores más importantes de la casa de Habsburgo, y lo hacemos de la mano de uno de los propios descendientes de la dinastía, Edward Hasburgo, quien ha escrito muchos libros sobre la historia de su propia familia. La entrevista no la haré yo, ya que mi inglés no es muy avanzado. La hará Carla Nicole Alegre Magliocco, politóloga, máster en Derecho y Economía, y también gran aficionada a la historia, con una peculiar simpatía por esta familia. ¿Quién mejor que un propio sucesor del mismísimo Carlos I, el rey emperador, para narrarnos este viaje por su historia?
Hello, Mr. Hasburgo, and thank you for joining us today in this special chapter for Storypolis. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here. And today we will be talking about with your great family, okay? The family of Europe, the Habsburg, okay? So we are in 1950. In that year, we can find your family in Switzerland. Am I right?
In 1270, in 950, yeah, 950, absolutely, yes. First of all, Carla, thank you for having me on your show. This is a premiere. I've given lots of interviews for my book, The Habsburg Way, and I'm giving the first ones for my new, but I've never, ever given an interview to Argentina. So this is really very, very cool.
Okay, even more honor. Okay, thank you.
Yes, in fact, yes, the Habsburg family pops up in Europe around the year, I always say 1000, it's easier to memorize, but 950, and you would find us in the quiet little corner between France, Germany, and Switzerland, down there around Lake Constance, Bodensee. And at that time, we were a family of counts trying to survive in that area. And we would have remained that if the German prince-electors wouldn't have been crazy enough to elect this Habsburg count as king of the Holy Roman Empire in 1273. And we were suddenly on the stage of world history.
Yes, and the first trace that we have is a castle in Argo. Argo, it's okay, it's okay. Argo.
Argo, yes, Argo. Okay. Argo is a canton, is a part of Switzerland, not too far away from Zurich. And you can drive from Zurich to the Habsburg in no time.
And you can also visit the castle today.
Yeah, the castle is there, and not only does it still stand, but you can visit it. And they tell me you can order a Habsburger in the cafeteria. So I think it's the only place in the world where you can do that.
Okay.
And so, yes, the Habsburg still stands. And Radbot of Habsburg, who built this castle, also gave his wife monastery not too far away from there.
Yes.
And that monastery became the first crypt of the Habsburgs. And
It is not the Capuchin that your family is buried today. It is another one.
No. The Capuchins are in Vienna, but this is in Switzerland. And
Okay.
I've never been there. It's one of the places I still have to go. But I can visit my ancestors 1,000 years ago. It's not bad. So the Habsburgs, as I said, would have remained in that little corner if that election hadn't taken place in 1273. In a way, if you want to understand a family is shaped by the way, by its biography. And some families, were emperor or kings of countries, of nations, with one language, with clear neighbors. And that's a total different situation from the one the Habsburgs were in. The Habsburgs, from the beginning of what they were doing, they had immediately to balance between many different states, trying to get all those members of the Holy Roman Empire to live in peace together, to put order, to reinforce the law. And all of that shaped us from the beginning. We never had the temptation to lead wars against neighbor and enlarge our empire, because from the beginning, our empire was a complicated juggling game. And so what we did instead was we got married. We married off our daughters to princes from neighboring countries, which is a very peaceful way of making peace with neighbors, or of ensuring a peaceful cohabitation.
Indeed, but you also fought. And what thoughts? I have my notes here, and I think we have to start with Rudolf or with Radbot. Radbot is the first one that we know about the family, and Rudolf was the one that began with the battle for Bohemia, if I'm right?
Yes. Well, it's complicated. They elected him king of the Holy Roman Empire. He was an old man already, and they thought he would never founded a dynasty, and he did. So what he had to do to explain is you had had a time of about 25 years without any emperor, the so-called interregnum, and he had to put the empire back in order. And in order to do that, he had to negotiate, reinstate laws, and most of all, punish those who had taken imperial territory in those 25 years. One of them was Ottokar of Bohemia. Yes. And Ottokar of Bohemia was a very strong knight and a very powerful rival to Rudolf, had taken Inner Austria and several parts of Austria, and he had to make him give it back to the empire. Yes. And he tried with negotiations, he tried with marriage proposals. In the end, he had to face him in the Battle of Dürnkrout, which is not too far away from Vienna, in a little village. And it was the big last battle of the knightly time.
And there he won.
Yes.
And added Bohemia to this empire. Okay.
No. That came later. Oh, okay. He won. He took Austria away from.
Okay.
Ottokar died in that battle, and he took Austria away, gave it back to the empire, and then he decided that he had to give it to someone as a fiefdom to look after it, and he decided to give it to his two sons. And that's how the Habsburgs arrived in Austria, because until then, they were in Switzerland. And Bohemia was for a long time not Habsburg property. It only became Habsburg property through marriage politics around 1500. But we're still 1273.
Okay. I was wrong about that. Okay, yes. So he gave this new land to his sons. Okay.
And then about 100 years later, the Swiss threw the Habsburgs out of Switzerland in the battles of Morgarten and Sembach. Habsburgs were suddenly bound to Austria, And there they remained because for about 150 years, the Habsburgs were out of the game of emperor again.
Yes.
They were never part of the electors. The others kept them out. And it took a while until Habsburg became an emperor again. And yeah.
In 1273, if I'm not wrong, okay, with King Albert, okay?
Yes, Albert was a bit later. Don't quote me on that. 1273 was Rudolf. Albert was later. But the really important step for the Habsburgs began in about 1460, 1470, so 200 years later. Then the Habsburgs had been sitting in Vienna and building the cathedral and building a university and finding among their documents the title of Archduke and all of that. But then in a very short period, the Habsburgs suddenly became really important, really important. And most of those steps were marriage. So first of all, Frederick III, emperor, he was the first Habsburg emperor to be crowned by the Pope, and therefore was also really emperor. When you were crowned by the Pope, you were emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. If not, you were only king. And he negotiated for his son, Maximilian, who was a very colorful character. He negotiated for him to be engaged to the only child of Charles the Bold of Burgundy.
Exactly.
Burgundy was this dukedom between Germany and France, quite long, going from the North Sea deep down nearly to the south of France.
Yes.
And he negotiated an engagement between those two. And when he suddenly died in a battle, and Maximilian got married to Mary of Burgundy. Yeah, beautiful. That's a long story that I could tell, but we don't have 4 hours, so you have to read the book, the first book. The Habsburgs got Burgundy. That was end of the 15th century. Beginning of the 16th century, Maximilian gambled away his grandchildren. Well, he married his 2 children to the heir and his sister of in Spain, and he married off his 2 very young grandchildren to the heir and his sister in Hungary. And as the king of Hungary was also king of Bohemia, it was a great gamble because it could have gone wrong too. But what happened was that Hungary was attacked by the Ottomans and taken by the Ottomans, by the Turks, and the young king died, and suddenly his widow was the heir to Hungary and to Bohemia, and the Habsburgs then also became the heirs to Spain, and with Spain to the entire known world. Then Spain had properties everywhere. So in a few, very few years, bam, they were suddenly all over the world.
Yes, your family did the career very quickly.
Yes, but it's incredible because it's a fun fact that Maximilian's father, Frederick, that I talked about, he wasn't very rich. He was a rather phlegmatic and very cautious man, but he dreamt big, and he had this motto, which is A-I-E-O-U, the vocals. And the Latin translation, one of the many explanations, is Austria est imperare orbi universo, which is, to Austria it is given that it will reign over the entire world. When he wrote that, he had Austria. That's it. When his son died, the Habsburgs were everywhere.
Okay, so, take it very seriously. Okay, perfect.
So then you have Charles V, famous Charles V, King of Spain, Emperor, and a legend on his own right, time of the Reformation. And you have his brother, Ferdinand I, who is his successor. And from then on, around 1500 to 1700, you have 2 branches of the Habsburg family. You have the Spanish branch and you have the Austrian branch. And they marry a lot between each other. That's the famous images of the Habsburg lip and the Habsburg jaw, which you find in the Spanish world everywhere, because of course the Spanish Habsburgs had an incredible influence in South America and in Central America and everywhere, and also in the States. I like to joke with my American friends that California, Texas, and Florida are Habsburg countries.
Yes, we're part of the
Yes.
Spanish Empire
Yes.
for quite a long time. Yes, I was also part. Argentina was also part of the Spanish Empire for a while.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Until so recently. Okay.
And then you have, for 200 years, you have two branches of the family. And then the Spanish branch dies out. And then the Austrian branch nearly dies out around 1700, nearly dies out. Because
there were some boys born.
Yes, you need boys to continue the family. Exactly. And Charles VI, in the beginning of the 18th century, first had no child for 10 years of his marriage. And you can't just send away your wife and marry someone else like you do in other places or in Protestant countries. This was your wife, and they prayed and they made vows, and then they had just two daughters. Thankfully, Charles had planned for this and had gotten all the rulers of Europe and the electors to agree to the so-called pragmatic sanction. If he would only have a daughter, then she could get married, adding the name of her husband to her name and continue the family. And everybody agreed. Everybody agreed to
something that was accepted very quickly, no?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm. And sorry, just have a black coat. So then his very young and very energetic and very beautiful daughter, Maria Teresa, suddenly became empress at a very tender age. She had just married, she had just had her first children, and her father died totally unexpected. And the moment he died, all the enemies of the Habsburgs began attacking the empire from all the sides. They thought, she's a woman, what can she do? And Frederick of Prussia attacked Silesia. The Bavarian Kurfürst attacked Austria and claimed that he was the Archduke now, and several others too. So it was really a bad situation. And Maria Teresa surprised everybody by her wittiness, her intelligence, her energy, and her sheer joy. She was an incredible, joyful person. She laughed, she danced, she played cards. She had 16 children in 20 years of marriage.
It is crazy. It is
totally crazy,
but it's crazy.
But imagine this huge family tree of the Habsburgs coming together in one person. If she wouldn't have had children, that would have been it. And then again, like this, incredible. And with the help of the Hungarians that she won over by going to Pozsony, to Bratislava, and begging their help, the Hungarians helped her, and so the Habsburg Empire survived. And then she married off her daughters all over Europe.
The empire survived, and your last name also.
Yes, Habsburg Lorraine, we call each other now. So many people on Twitter enjoy pointing out to me that in reality I'm only Mr. Lorraine and not Mr. Habsburg.
Yes.
Yes, and so after Maria Teresa, we were already in the 1780s, and then you had Joseph II, her son, who only reigned for 10 years and did a lot of stupid things when it came to trying to enforce enlightenment, also against religion and devotion. I'm not a great fan of his. He also tried to anger the Hungarians, the Bohemians, and everybody else by trying to install a centralistic rule, which doesn't work.
We are in the times of the Illustration.
Yes, exactly.
We didn't make a very strong point talking about the Reformation, but Charles V and Maria Teresa had to deal with this. Even in your book, you tell some things about your family that deny the sacraments at their death.
Not all Habsburg rulers were really good Catholics. Most of them were, really. We have quite a good record for 800 years. Quite a good record.
Had to go through the Reformation.
With a very strong start and a very strong finish. But there were one or two or three that were really weak sauce, as they say in America. Two of them are said to have denied confession and extreme unction, which is so totally unimaginable for me to do.
No, of
And
course.
yeah, so yes, we jump forward and we are in the 19th century. Emperor Franz Joseph, the most famous Habsburg of the last 200 years, I would say, with his white beard, and he ruled so long that many people's grandparents already grew up under him. And as a young man, he rode on a horse in fight with sword. As an old man, he saw airplanes and trench war and machine guns. And then in the end, we had this very last emperor in just for 1.5 years in the First World War, which was the beautiful and wonderful character of Blessed Emperor Karl, married 8 children with a beautiful wife, and I think a saint, the only blessed in the Habsburg family so far. I hope not the last. And that's our family history in a nutshell. It's really interesting because I'm lucky, you know, there are so many families with terrible histories. Well, the Habsburgs had quite a good one.
Yes, indeed. And in the middle, your family beat Napoleon in one of the war in Hasburgo.
Yes.
But finally, Napoleon made the empire as we knew it disappear. It was gone and born the Austrian Empire, the
Yes.
Austrian-Hungary Empire. Okay.
Yes, when Emperor Francis of Austria, Francis II, realized that the Holy Roman Empire was in danger to getting into the hands of Napoleon, he dissolved it, and he started his own Austro-Hungarian Empire, or Austro-Hungarian Bohemian Empire, and he changed his name from Francis II of the Holy Roman Empire to Francis I of Austria-Hungary. So yeah, that was a fresh start about 120 years before the end of the Habsburg monarchy. And he realized something quite extraordinary. He realized, I would say, the greatest antidote to aggressive nationalism. The Habsburg Empire was a place where languages, nations, races, everybody could live together in peace and in a balanced way. In the Austro-Hungarian parliament, you spoke 9 languages. Those were respected. And there are many people who say that the things that don't run that well in the European Union were realized far better in the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
That's something that we cannot imagine today because we are in America and 90% of the continent speaks the same languages. We are, I don't know, 100 countries. Well, something related happened there because there were a lot of what we today call countries, but they weren't. They were all part of the same nation, if we can say. I don't know if nation is the correct word.
It's not a nation. It was an empire that one of the chapters in my book, The Habsburg Way, is called "Believe in the Empire and in Subsidiarity." A good empire is an empire that strongly respects every single nation within it, but all the nations include themselves in a larger structure because they believe in the idea that is above it. And that's the thing that doesn't work in the European Union, because you don't have a common idea. There is nothing above it. But what you are saying is very right. You respected the languages so much that the anthem of Austria, Gott erhalte, Gott beschütze unseren Kaiser, existed in every language of the empire and was sung in every language of the empire. Now imagine if you had the Marseillaise sung in 5 different languages.
No.
Or the Argentinian anthem. It's unthinkable. So that's what the Habsburg Empire was. And you know, it's interesting because people in books like to say it was doomed. It was this overloaded bureaucratic machinery that was doomed to fail. It's not true.
No.
The Habsburg Empire was very alive, it was only destroyed at the end of the First World War, but it was working very, very nice. And had Franz Ferdinand not been assassinated in Sarajevo in 1914, had he survived, had Franz Joseph died in 1916 from a cold, I think from pneumonia, and Franz Ferdinand would have become emperor, he might have solidified the empire even more, because he had ideas how to take the Slavic people even more in. And of course, you can't do these kind of thoughts, but I'm just saying this was something alive and kicking when it was killed by the First World War.
So you think the empire would have survived the First World War because it was also not an empire but a kingdom in Germany, which was dissolved after First World War.
It is true. It is true that at the end of the First World War, there was a great wave of monarchies closing down.
Exactly.
But again, all of that only happened because of the assassination of Sarajevo in 1914.
Yes, of course.
If the First World War wouldn't have happened, we might have many, many strong monarchies left in Europe. And but it's fruitless because it isn't. It's the way it is. And now my family is everywhere in Europe and in the world. I've got about 400, 500 cousins. I've got a bed to sleep in wherever I go, which is very nice.
400 what? Cousins?
400 to 500 cousins all over the world. I don't know all of them well, but I know quite a lot. And we have a WhatsApp group where we meet every day.
You are 400 people in a WhatsApp group.
Well, not all of them are. I would say there's about 100 of them in, but everyone who has it has one or two others who look into it. And so we get most of them, I think. And we exchange articles, baby photos, cat photos, the usual stuff.
We have some of you here in America, exactly in Mexico.
Yes. One brother of Otto went to Mexico, so his descendants are in Mexico, yes.
Well, all of this is very well explained in your book, The Habsburg Way, which I highly recommend. But you are about to present another one.
Yes.
Okay.
It's called Building a Wholesome Family in a Broken World. It looks like this, and it's out on October 15.
Okay.
It's by the way, this is the Habsburg family colors, black and gold. That's why they chose it. It's a bit different. The Habsburg Way, my first book was about the history of my family and a few lessons for today. The second one is really my lessons for how to find a good spouse, how to get engaged, how to get married, how to have children, how to raise the children, and everything until grandparents and death, and how to live all this in the family. So it's about how to build a wholesome family in this crazy, broken, destroyed world, and how to go about it. And it's mostly built on my own experiences with my family, but it is peppered with examples from the Habsburg history again. I found a few very touching, very sweet, and very beautiful stories about marriage, about love in marriage, about having children, about all these topics while I wrote this book. So the people who read it will again find very interesting characters from the Habsburg lore. And what I really say in this book, and I say it more clearly than in the first book, is the key is really Catholic.
Of course.
I really believe that. I say it in the book. I say, if I can suggest something, you want to have a good marriage, marry a Catholic and become a Catholic if you're not Catholic.
Yes,
I have lots of respect for all the other religions. I also have respect for people who are agnostics or atheists. But the Catholic faith gives you a set of values, and all those helps for everyday survival of marriage. And for the joy of marriage, all those things the Catholic Church has in spades. And so that's one of the key lessons of my book, is that. And a very, very strong key lesson is no cohabitation. Don't live together before you're married.
There is a modern author called Jordan Peterson,
Yes.
He's not a Catholic yet, but one
Yeah.
of the first advices is no cohabitate. Get married.
Yes.
Okay.
It sounds crazy. You know, people who hear that say, oh, those Catholics, they're prudish. They have no joy in love and all that. It's ridiculous. It's just no cohabitation was the normal thing for the last 10,000 years. Suddenly, since the 1960s, everything has changed. And look around you and tell me whether people are far more happy than they were before. So no cohabitation. And I say you have to begin far earlier. You have to begin with the education of your children before they even get into the dating game. They need to know certain rules. And my book is a great plaidoyer to encourage people to play the great game. Go for a lifelong happy marriage. Don't waste your energy and don't waste what you have, because one relationship after the other, every relationship with cohabitation will lessen your chance of a lifelong happy marriage. People don't realize that because media and films and everyone tells them, have fun, go out there, you're only young once, afterwards it's boring. And that's all bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
But yeah. So those two things are among the key points that I talk about in my book.
You have a nice story about Marie Antoinette, who was also a Habsburg, for those who doesn't know, in the time of her death, of her father's death, and she was denied the sacraments.
Yes. One of the points I make in my first book, but also in the second book, is that dying well is very important. In the first book, I give a lot of examples of Habsburgs who prepared their death and who tried to die well and who had good funerals. In the second book, I speak about what is the best way to die in and with your family, and give examples for that from the Habsburg law. But Marie Antoinette is absolutely an incredible story. You know, she was raised very devout Catholic. Her mother, by her very devout mother, and she did her prayers and she did all of that. Then she came to France. She married a very devout husband, Louis XVI, but she must sort of have lost herself a bit in the everyday life of the court. And then when the revolution happened, and when she got imprisoned and all that, she really found back her way to a deep, devout faith. And yes, as you said, she suffered horribly at the end because they denied her confession. To be correct, they would have allowed her to make confession at the priest of the revolution, but those were excommunicated because they were servants of the revolution. She could only go to confession with a real priest of Rome, and they didn't allow her that. So she was suffering because she wanted to go to confession before she died. And it was terrible. She suffered terribly. And then the story is told not by her or by a hagiographer, but by the hangman, by the executioner of Paris, who is called Charles-Henri Sanson. And he's from an old family of hangman and executioners, and it's a book you should read one day. You can buy it online.
Yes,
and he describes every single famous revolutionary that he brought to the guillotine, and also Marie Antoinette. And he said when he sat with her on that little chariot and rode through the streets of Paris, and she was, tied with her hands behind her back, she looked around, she was restless, unhappy, and nervous, and was looking at the houses around. And she was saying, what is wrong? And then suddenly, when she drove past one house, she suddenly was totally peaceful. She was totally happy and quiet, and she went to her death in a total peace. And he didn't understand what was going on. So he drove back, he tried to look at the house, he saw nothing strange there. And after the revolution, there were Catholics who told him the story, and they told her they had learned that she was suffering and that she wanted to go to confession and that she was denied. So they smuggled in a bishop to Paris, which was suicide, because if you're a Catholic bishop or a priest and you were caught, you were immediately executed. And they smuggled him in, and they told her through a messenger, there's going to be at one window along your way a bishop who's going to give you the absolution in extremis. And she was looking and she saw him and she knew everything was good. You see, most people nowadays don't appreciate confession anymore. And in some parts of Europe, people don't even know that there's confession. But this is one of the helps to get to heaven that we've thrown away far too quickly. And I strongly encourage people to go to confession. I strongly encourage parents to show their kids that they go to confession. I give 2 examples in my new book about Habsburgs who were not exactly great examples in faith. One of them is the husband of Maria Teresa. The funny thing is that the husband of the deeply devout 16 children Catholic Empress Maria Teresa was the only Freemason we ever had in the family. And yes, he was rather, I would say, a liberal, humanistic, one world thought, very nice, charming, warm-hearted, nice, but not exactly a devout man. And he never in his letters, he speaks about faith in church. But he had one topic where he was iron, and that was he went to confession every week. And he encouraged his children to go to confession every week. And he encouraged them to go to communion often, but only after confession. And he was saying this to his children all the time. And when he died, Maria Teresa tells an incredible story. He said, you know, the terrible thing about your father's, here she writes to her children, terrible thing about your father's death was that he died without any preparation. He suddenly collapsed after a theater play on his way home. And what a terrible story. But it was a Sunday and he had confessed and he had gone to Mass in the morning. His example. And I say, fathers, be an example to your children. Fathers, let your children see you kneel. Let your children see you have a rosary in the pocket. This changes everything. Everything. We shouldn't be afraid of these things. And that's the core message, among others, of my book.
Okay, it's perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Hasburgo. It has been a pleasure to chat with you for a while. Your family is huge, is wonderful. Also, your books. I look forward to read this new one. It will help me even more being a mom than knowing about your family. So thank you for that. Well, I hope to have you here again another time.
I'm sure I will come. Thank you for having me. Hasta luego.
It's very
muchas gracias para la invitación.